Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Boss Talk here at the Public Safety Training Academy. I'm joined here today by a couple members of Montgomery County Fire Rescue who were deployed in response to Hurricane Helene in late September, early October of 2024. So this past year, obviously we're a little bit delayed in this Boss Talk. We had some scheduling challenges and then some other things to overcome before we could air this episode, but awesome stories and in response to that event that we have today. Before we get started with these guys, just a couple housekeeping items. Again, just to remind everybody, tomorrow morning here at the Training Academy, the Carlos Alfaro Memorial Blood Drive. Please sign up if you have not done so already, and we should have the advertisement here up on the screen. You contact Chief Mann, Battalion Chief Mann, with any questions. But again, it's tomorrow morning here at the Training Academy. Please come out. It's a great annual event in support of a good cause. So just another reminder for that. As far as the episode today, we will be giving an hour of COPDI for chief officers who need that. So please, if you need the COPDI, remember to sign in on the link on Quick Links to get COPDI credit. And as always, we will be monitoring the chat. So if you're watching live, Chief Light's back here, and we'll take any questions from the chat and filter them into us if you have any questions as we go along for the panel about the event itself or anything else. So let's see, I think that's about it for housekeeping items. So just to introduce the people that are here with us, you probably recognize some of them. So we have Master Firefighter Tim Beatty from Company 30 on B shift, correct?
Yes, sir.
So he's here representing Maryland HART, and if you don't know what that is, he's going to explain what that is and what his role was in the response to this event. We also have Master Firefighter Brad Walters from Company 29 on A shift, and then Master Firefighter Mike Johns from Company 29 on C shift, and they're both representing Maryland Task Force 1, the FEMA side of the response to Hurricane Helene. So, and they're kind of explain what each of these organizations are. Obviously, they work for Montgomery County Fire Rescue, but they were deployed in response to this event as members of these other organizations. So they'll kind of explain a little bit about what they are, how they got deployed, and then a little bit about the actual deployment itself and their operations and some of the things that they got to do and see, which is pretty remarkable. So I'm not going to take up too much time. We only have an hour on this episode, so we're going to start off just with a quick opening, and I'm going to go to Master Firefighter Beatty first, who's going to explain what Maryland HART is. Again, you might have heard of it. You might have heard the acronym. You might not know kind of how he got involved and who operates it, and then we'll do the same for FEMA and get into the actual deployment. So, Tim, you want to explain what is HART and how did you get involved?
First off, thanks for having us here.
Absolutely.
It's a good time. Maryland HART stands for Maryland Helicopter Aquatics Response Team. Basically a joint team, combined team with rescuers from Montgomery County, Howard County, Baltimore County, and Harford County. Our coordinator is Michael Berna. Some people have known him from rescue classes and stuff like that. He's a swiftwater guru. He started the team back in, I believe it was 2008 with Baltimore County. He was a Baltimore County captain. He's now retired and is a Harford County battalion chief. But he started the team back in 2008 with the Maryland Army National Guard as well as the Baltimore County Police. They're right along the bay there in Baltimore County, so they run a lot of boaters in distress and stuff like that. So there was a need. And there was also, after Hurricane Isabel came up, they determined there's a need for a helicopter rescue in the state of Maryland. So they formed this team, and back then it was just Baltimore County, and then they realized they could use some help. That's when the other jurisdictions got involved. Our Montgomery County got involved back in, I believe it was 2017, with Capt Mike Stream and Lieutenant Doug Bernardo. They were our first two team members. Went through the program, and then they've had a couple deployments since then. And then we brought on now he's Lieutenant Curry, and myself. And we got on, I believe it was 2021. We were supposed to get in around COVID, 2020. That's when we got the announcement that they were going to be opening some positions we could try out. It's a pretty extensive physical agility test, a lot of swimming and stuff. So we were training pretty hard, and then COVID hit. So that kind of messed some things up, and I believe we started February 2021, started training. We train monthly. All of us train together. We just started an air branch in Maryland, which is pretty exciting. You were out with us for Helo Ops with MSP. We do that now, a monthly training program with Maryland State Police. It'll be the Maryland Army National Guard and Baltimore County Police. So all of the technicians will be trained on each aircraft. So if we get an incident like Helene in Maryland, we can deploy rescuers on each of those aircraft, and we're all trained the same. So it's pretty cool.
So it's basically an interface between helicopter rescue operations and water rescue operations, and you kind of just combine to be able to utilize both those resources to affect rescues, right?
Yeah, so we know that Maryland State Police does a lot of hoists. The Baltimore County helicopter has hoists. The Army National Guard has a hoist, right? They have rescuers that can do that on land perfectly fine. Around the water, not so much.
Right.
So
it's basically limited to Coast Guard, essentially, right?
Exactly.
That would do over water type stuff without you guys, right?
Right. So they decided, hey, let's take, Baltimore County's got a great swift water program. All the other counties do as well. So let's take some of their rescuers, put them on our helicopters, and we can, get a rescue done.
And so and I guess how you guys got involved with Hurricane Helene, right? You're not just limited to the state of Maryland. I guess you can deploy elsewhere, right?
That's correct.
So is that all done through the HART as its own group, or is the Army National Guard coordinate that, or how does that work?
So HART is managed through MDEM,
Okay.
which is the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. That's kind of like the hub, right? They will send out EMAC requests, other jurisdictions, other states will send out EMAC requests for, resources. We kind of put it out there of what we can offer. We can say, hey, we have a CH-47 available. We have 2 UH-60s with this many rescuers that we can send you. And then it's kind of like they push it out. And if the state wants it, they buy it.
So for those who might not know, right, in a major incident such as this, obviously we have automatic aid and mutual aid with our in-state partners, but if it can't be handled that way or they don't have that resource, they can use, make that EMAC request, which is basically for interstate mutual aid, right, and call them, and
Right.
we can then provide those resources.
That's
so,
correct.
Cool. All right, so we'll get back to a little bit more about your specific deployment, kind of how you got deployed to this event, where you went, and then your operations. I want to talk to the FEMA guys real quick, and Mike, I guess if you want to explain real quick. Sure. Most people know, what FEMA is and kind of heard of USAR or whatever, but we know there's, if you have a little bit more knowledge, that there's different types of teams and kind of you can deploy a smaller group of people, a larger group of people. You want to just explain briefly what your guys' role is on the FEMA team and kind of who got deployed or how much of the team got deployed for this event?
Sure, absolutely. Our FEMA task force, we are lucky to be one of 28 federally grant-funded urban search and rescue task forces in the country. Montgomery County Fire Rescue is, in essence, the host agency. They call it the sponsoring agency. So that's, gives our members the opportunity to be a part of this team if they want. Very similar to the HART team, as Tim was explaining. We tap other agencies and jurisdictions in the state of Maryland. We have 5 what we call participating agencies throughout Maryland and the District of Columbia who have members who participate and make up our task force as well. At the task force level, we're really no different than the fire department when you look at it from an organization standpoint. Just like you have a truck company or an engine company or a rescue squad, EMS units in the fire department, our task force is broken down to what we call disciplines that specialize in unique skill sets and bring that all to bear with the entire task force. So Brad and I are both assigned to the rescue discipline. Right now our current roles are managers within that discipline, so be similar to a company officer, a unit officer on a fire engine. Then we have leadership roles, task force leaders. Our PSTA Battalion Chief Jason Light, he happens to be one of our task force leaders, so he would be the equivalent of a battalion chief on a fire ground. And then within that task force, we have other specialties: medical, hazmat, search. We have engineers, structure specialists. We have doctors, logistics guys who get us to and from where we need to be and help support us. So it's really, no different than the fire ground. A lot of different entities coming together to get one function and job done, and that's how we operate and the way we work. As far as the size, you often hear different terms of the sending out 80-person teams or smaller teams. The USAR system follows NIMS typing, so our largest force size per se is what we call a Type 1 task force. That could be 80 plus personnel going out the road, down to even small, what they call single resources. It could be a single canine handler and a support person for a very specialized function, and we've done that before. For this particular deployment, we operated at a Type 3 task force size, which is roughly 35 to 45 members, and that was our strength for Helene. And I know Bradley will later explain some of the specific functions we performed there.
And was that mostly focused on water rescue? Because I mean, the cool thing is you bring a ton of different disciplines, right? So this type of event, and if people don't, and we'll kind of go over what type of event it was, but it involved, obviously the water element where there's a lot of flooding, but also structural collapse, right? Because the flooding caused structures to collapse and be compromised and things. So when you bring those 35 to 40 people in that Type 3 team, is that kind of a conglomeration of those different disciplines, or was it mostly focused on one discipline or another?
So a little bit of both, in all honesty. If you go back to the history of the FEMA task forces, they were developed in the early 90s. In fact, former Chief Tom Carr was a big catalyst for the introduction of the FEMA system, or the USAR system, at the national level. And back then the focus was primarily structural collapse, and some of the first deployments were high-profile building collapses, Oklahoma City,
right.
the Pentagon, things like that. And then you fast forward to Hurricane Katrina, and that was really a pivotal moment for the system, where they got into something that they had never really planned or accounted for before, with both wide area search and inland water flooding and coastal flooding. And ever since then, the system's really been evolving, and we've been seeing more responses to these water events. So to answer your question, when they tapped us for these hurricane events, usually they preface that this is a potential water-borne event with the option, or not the option per se, but the chance that you be encountering structural collapse as well. But they definitely do emphasize the water environment, and that changes the cache that we take. Our logistics specialists have to change our cache configuration. Have to account for boats, and getting boats and trailers, to the scene as water PPE. And then our complement from our staffing means that we have to staff with people who are water qualified and trained to operate in a water environment if they encounter it.
And I think that's a really cool thing from a responder perspective, right? Because anybody that does our job, right, I think, we never want to see bad stuff happen to people, right? But we train, right? We train to do our job, right? We want to do our job, right? We want to respond to these high profile events, and you want to go to the biggest fires, right? And the biggest emergencies, to be part of mitigating that, right? Put your skills to the test. So even if you're a hazmat person, let's say, right? It's not often you get to interface that hazmat element in a flooding scenario, and you might have multiple disciplines that you're interested in, that you train for, and you kind of get to put them all together, right? The flooding, the structural collapse, the hazmat, the medical, whatever it is that you're into. So I think that's pretty cool to know that, again, as being, and we talked a little bit about this before, and I plan to wrap up with it, but being in this organization in Montgomery County Fire Rescue, having these kind of opportunities, where you're really into water rescue, but you get to fly around in a helicopter and respond to these most major events and rescue people in these super high profile scenarios, super high risk scenarios. I just think it's a really cool thing that you get an opportunity to do because you're a member of this organization. So I think that's a good background. Again, I don't want to take too much time with the background stuff. So let's talk a little bit about the actual Hurricane Helene deployment. And Brad, do you want to tell us a little bit about the event itself, kind of how it started, when and where the hurricane made landfall, and kind of how it progressed, and then we'll get into where you guys went in response to that.
Sure. So the hurricane actually came up through the Gulf, and it came and made landfall right in the bend of Florida, at Perry, Florida, at a Category 4 hurricane and 140-mile-an-hour winds. Some side notes, didn't really know this until today. The deadliest hurricane since Maria, and the deadliest to strike the mainland since Katrina in 2015. And caused roughly about $78 billion worth of damages through its entire path. So,
okay. So initially they thought, I guess and when you guys initially got activated, can you just talk quickly about where you got deployed and and what the thought was about where the highest, I guess, amount of damage was going to be in danger?
Yeah. So originally, the Blue IST, which is the incident support team, was activated to Florida, and then the next day they activated 6 Type 1 teams to Florida. So they really thought that the concentration of the most damages were going to be in Florida.
In the area where it made landfall.
Yep,
which,
of course.
Yeah.
With the bend not being densely populated, it didn't have that major impact as what they thought. Mm-hmm. Shortly after that, we were actually deployed to Georgia. So us and another team as a Type 3 were deployed to Georgia. We made it to Macon, Georgia, just the day before landfall actually in Florida.
This is like September, I guess, 20.
September 25th.
Okay.
Yep, September 25th. So the 23rd, the IST was activated, and the 24th, the team started activating into Florida.
Okay, so how long did you guys stay down where you initially made it to Georgia?
So we made it to Macon, finally actually bedded down around the evening of September 26th, and then that overnight, that landfall took place. As it took place, it was kind of rapid as it came through Florida into Georgia. About 3:30 in the morning, we were actually called and reached out to and activated our QRF, which is a quick reaction force, down to Valdosta, Georgia, which was like 2 hours south of Macon, for what they reported: multiple building collapses, trees into buildings, unknown on the residents, and truly just did not have a handle on the overall situation. So we sent an entire quick reaction force down there to kind of get a grasp on what was going on, what was needed, and then the rest of the team started to follow. And that was about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. The rest of the team was on the road shortly an hour after that, heading down there to do whatever we needed to do. So,
and as we go along, if there's any media, these guys have a lot of media, obviously. So if there's anything you guys wanted to put up, just feel free to tell them. And I'm sure they're scrolling some stuff up there already. But
so actually, on that picture, I don't know if that picture that's currently on the screen right now, you can see the teams throughout Florida as it's making landfall. And then if you look right above Georgia, you actually can see the little USAR task force sign is actually us, and then Missouri is up above Atlanta. We're right there above the Georgia text. So we were able to, while we were right in the path, we were able to drive right down to Valdosta with no issues as well as it came through. So,
and roughly, like, if you want to just talk about like how long you stayed in that area and operated in that area, because I think the bulk of what you did was actually once you moved, right?
So we spent 2 days in Valdosta truly working. But the September 27th, we finally got a handle on what was going on. The local emergency management office there reached out. The 911 center, we all kind of met right there, and were able to understand that there was a large area of a neighborhood that was hit either by straight line winds or tornado activity. So we were able to go ahead and really put ourselves into those neighborhoods. They were not truly passable by any vehicles, so a lot of boots on the grounds, walking around, making contact, and doing structure assessments throughout Valdosta. And that took about 2 days as we went through there to truly wrap all that and complete it. And you can see that on the screen. That's pretty much how every neighborhood looked, was with all those trees bent over and pushed all the way down into structures and so forth from there.
So you guys like searching structures as you go, assessing them.
If there was any damage, major damage to the structure, we did a search to make sure no one was inside. Any unaffected structures we left alone, and then there were some directed searches that were either already reported to the 911 center throughout the middle of the night that needed to be followed up on, any rescue recovery operation that was reported that we also
had those areas been evacuated, or was that
no? That area was not evacuated. It was occupied fully at the time. And they truly thought they were not going to have a significant impact, but they were on the right side of that, right north side of that hurricane.
Where the winds were.
Yep, where the winds were coming and where that tornado activity is known for. So good opportunity for the dogs to run through a lot of the structures there that were collapsed and needed to have a follow-up through there. And luckily no major issues there in Valdosta other than obviously property.
Okay.
This was actually one of those targeted searches Bradley was talking about. The local emergency managers said that they had a homeless population that often, lived in that area and then took shelter in some of these structures. And so this was a commercial building that did have partial collapse, and they had asked our canine assets to do a search there because they did have a concern or worry that they did have people in that building during the hurricane.
So when you guys are operating, you're operating kind of alongside of these local jurisdictions. Obviously, they have the institutional knowledge, right, and about things like that, so they can kind of direct where you guys are most needed.
Yep. Yeah, and that's really our MO as a USAR task force. We're not there to come
take
in and take over.
Right.
We're there to help, and our first arriving members in Valdosta, that's exactly what they did. They met with the emergency planners and the city officials, and the question was, what can we do for you? What are your needs? Not necessarily what we're going to do for them.
Yeah, I think that's a really important concept of what it's all about.
The screen that you see on the TV now actually is a whiteboard inside of a firehouse. So we were able to get down into the neighborhood and go to the local firehouse there. We actually started working with those gentlemen there inside the firehouse, seeing what they needed to, but then also they allowed us to utilize their whiteboard, their firehouse for what we needed. And we were able to build out everything there from our search patterns and where we were going throughout the neighborhood. So And the good part about this too, we were on our deployment. We were able to bring 4 dogs with us on this one, so we had 2 live find and 2 human remains dogs with us that were able to be utilized throughout the entire deployment. So,
Cool. All right. From there, kind of once you guys wrapped up that several-day rescue operation or search operation there, what happened after that?
obviously, we knew that just from hearing all the reports that North Carolina and Tennessee were currently being affected, and it seemed like the storm had kind of stalled over top of North Carolina, Tennessee.
Just dumping a ton of rain.
Yeah, yeah, of course, right in the mountain ranges too. So once we got back, we already knew we were going to be heading to North Carolina or relocated to North Carolina with an unknown destination other than Western North Carolina, because that was the most affected. So we actually had started the next day. It was September 29th. We had actually started heading.
How do you guys move? Like when you move from one place, obviously you got to pack your stuff up, right? I mean,
Packed everything up in convoy with all the vehicles and all the personnel. So,
and that consists of what on this type of deployment? Like how many vehicles roughly? Like
roughly about 13 vehicles. It was made comprised of tractor trailers, pickup trucks pulling boats, and then vans as well.
And you guys are basically completely self-sufficient
Yes,
at
indeed.
that point, right?
Yep.
So you bring everything with you that you need, right?
If we needed to put up a tent and sleep in a tent, we could put it all up and supply for the whole team to have its all
So
accommodations,
generators,
and everything
food,
it needs.
and
Yes,
all that
sir.
kind of stuff.
Yep.
Cool. Very cool.
So of course, the day prior to us leaving, they had the USAR system had already deployed additional resources to that area, to North Carolina and Tennessee, and we just knew that we were going to be migrating that way too. So we started driving through South Carolina, made our way up to Western North Carolina, and then ended up getting a destination of Cherokee, North Carolina, which was kind of right on that west coast or western portion of North Carolina into the mountain
Can you
range of
describe?
Appalachian.
Can you guys kind of describe what that area of North Carolina is like? I mean, I've never been to Western North Carolina. I go to the beach, but
So, yeah.
that's not. I know it's nothing like that. So, like, what's that area like?
It's if you can imagine what we talked about earlier, like Western Maryland, just completely out rural area, a lot of mountain ranges. And when I say mountain ranges, you were truly driving up and down, and no straight lines, right? You're driving around whatever you possibly can. So
Pretty sparsely populated, not a whole lot of population centers,
Yeah.
I guess, right?
yeah. So and that was Cherokee, North Carolina was kind of right around the area that we were assigned to, which ended up being Buncombe County.
Okay. Cool. All right. You want to just go
Yeah.
through your time there then in that area and kind of the type of operations you guys performed and
Yep.
some of the stuff you saw?
We arrived Cherokee, North Carolina about 3 o'clock, and then immediately that night we were pushed over to the Emergency Management Center there and the EOC, and we were able to sit down and talk with some of the state teams that were already there working, and then also some local jurisdiction aspects of exactly what needed to be done and what needed to be handled. From there, we realized that there was a lot not handled and a lot still to be done. So
And most of it was related to flooding.
flooding, yep. So again, and this is we were just having this conversation with Beatty earlier. We're used to rivers flowing north to south here. There, everything flowed south to north just because of the mountain ranges and how the topography of the area. And what it was explained to us is exactly where we were was the center down point of 4 mountain ranges. So this kind of collected all 4 of the mountain ranges water that came down and then just overcame the rivers and tributaries that were all there and pushed up into obviously the residential neighborhoods. So the next day we were pushed over to Lake Junaluska. So essentially just kind of northwest of where we were a little bit staging wise. We made our way there. We went to a local fire department, met up with a state team of Winston-Salem, and then worked along a large area along the Pigeon River, right there in Lake Junaluska. And we were able to do a bunch of searches in the water. We put 2 boats in with Winston-Salem. We actually put, there's a couple pictures, not this picture, but there's a couple pictures with a canine in a boat. We were able to put our canines in the boat with the handlers and make our way along the shorelines themselves, doing some checks, making sure we're checking debris piles. And when I say debris piles, these debris piles were larger than this room. And we'll talk about a delayering process later on that aspect of exactly.
So the mission was pretty much search and recovery.
Search and recovery at this point. Yep, search and recovery. So as we went along those shorelines, we also had boots on the ground walking up and down the shorelines, up into the residential areas. Wherever a water touched if a water touched a structure, we were searching that structure to make sure that there were no unmet needs. So as we progressed through that took roughly about a day. We were able to come back, regroup, and meet that night and have our assignment for the next day, which was just going north, right along downriver of that aspect. So we just progressed all the way down that Pigeon River. Along with the next day, we met up with another state team. The state team that through the EMAC request at that point was from Wisconsin. So we worked with them, and that was up. I want to make sure I say this correctly. Was Crabtree. It was Crabtree, North Carolina. So we worked our way up through Crabtree, North Carolina, along the Pigeon River, all the way up to what you see there is the Walters Dam.
Aptly named.
Yes.
It wasn't
yes.
named after you.
Yes. Made our way all the way up to the furthest point of the river where it was right along the North Carolina-Tennessee border, and made our way all the way to that dam itself and searching along the shoreline. And then we also had some directed or targeted searches, including large debris piles that were 40 feet in the air, caught up around a bridge, or whether it was a barn that had a large debris pile in it that needed to be searched with the dogs. A lot of targeted searches with with just an unknown that we were able to go ahead and search with the HRD dogs, human remain dogs.
And just to give everybody an appreciation of, I guess, how much work there is, right? Like, what's like our work cycle like? I mean, obviously this happens, over a course of days, but like, what's your normal like work cycle like in terms of like hours worked and then rest period and then back to work? Like, what's that like?
That all depends on the actual incident that's taken place. So if it's a Type 1 team, Type 1 teams with those 80 personnel are really set up to do 24-hour operations, have two teams working, and then come in and backfill those teams with two additional more teams to do 24 hours. Where we had a Type 3, and honestly, even the Type 1 teams there, we're only operating from daylight to sunset.
Basically
so
because it was a
recovery operation at that point. So we were operating 12-hour days throughout the entire deployment.
But obviously, there's always stuff happening, right? Even though you guys are always out, you guys are out operating for 12 hours. Then that other 12 hours where you're recovering or whatever, the logs people, I'm
Yes.
assuming, are
Yes.
resupplying, refueling,
And that's what I was going to add.
maintaining.
This
Yeah.
deployment was a unique one. When we went to Maui, we were fortunate that our lodging and our facilities were within a few miles of where we were operating. So, you get up in the morning and you're at your operational area within a matter of 15, 20 minutes. Here dealing with the mountains that Bradley talked about, sometimes we were traveling an hour and a half or more just to get to our operational area. And then you get yourself established and meet with the local AHCA and figure out what your needs are. Then you do a whole operational work period. You wrap up your work period, and then you got that hour and a half, almost 2-hour drive back home. And then, you brought up our logistics folks. Those poor guys were back at the base all day long, prepping things, either rehabbing from our previous day's operations, getting us ready for the next day. And then they've got to wait for us to roll in at dusk, or sometimes nightfall. It was dark, we're out with headlights and flashlights doing these things, helping us get rehabbed. And like you said, you catch a few hours of sleep and you get up and do it all over again, which is fine. We're all in it, and that's what we're there to do.
Right.
But it definitely prolonged the days with the additional travel and the mountainous terrain.
And I think one of the worst points of this too is the communication aspect throughout the entire deployment. So there was extremely limited cell phone service, especially depending on the carrier, whether it was First Net or Verizon or so forth. So trying to actually reach back to tell those logistic folks of what we may need for the next day or what we had coming in that needed to be taken care of was very limited. So until you actually got within range of where we were staying and our lodging was, it was almost non-existent. So it was kind of trying to catch up to that point too and get everything straight for the night. And
Did you guys have a lot of interaction with, like, I guess, the local population that while you were out there? I mean, I know you're predominantly on the waterways and stuff like that, doing these. I mean, how much interaction do you have with the people there, and what was that like?
First, it's a great question, because first I'll start with Valdosta. Valdosta was probably the most interaction we had with everyone, just because we were in the neighborhoods, everyone was out.
Right.
And I have to say it was kind of funny, because everyone would see Montgomery County written on one of the gators and would run up and yell, "You guys from Montgomery County? I'm from Rockville. I'm from Bethesda." And it was a large amount of the population was actually from Montgomery County. It was kind of funny. But again, same thing in North Carolina. You're going through these neighborhoods and you're making contact with almost all of the residents. They don't leave these residents. They're there unless their home is completely taken away. So you're there trying to just assist them in any way possible, any unmet needs they have, and you're certainly interacting with them all the way throughout the deployment.
Just to bring the human element to it, obviously, these are people that, a lot of these are more impoverished areas, right? People, like you said, they live there, they grow up there, they stay there, a lot of these areas, right? And they don't want to leave, and they're receptive I'm assuming, to your help, appreciative that you're there, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. Most, especially in North Carolina, they were really receptive on us being there and helping us out. And then, I mean, they were even help rebuild some of the roadways and structures just for us to get back to the areas that we needed to. And one of the areas in our search, the first day in one of our areas, we were trying to get back up the roadway to a couple of the residences and up in the mountaintop, and the road had been washed away. And I think the next day we came back, the local gentleman had rebuilt the road for us to make that cross so we could actually make our way up there and do appropriate searches. So
truly a combined effort.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, without getting too graphic as far as like the recoveries, like did you guys make recoveries while you were there? How was that, like in terms of like delayering these piles, and like did you find bodies and did you make recoveries, or like, I mean, when you're doing these searches, like
So luckily for our team, for our personnel, we didn't make any recoveries ourselves. Now, there were recoveries all the way throughout, especially the canines played a big part in that. So they were able to go and search the piles with other teams. They would make a hit or confirm that they had some type of smell or scent. And then those teams were actually able to make those delayering processes and make those recoveries. So we say lucky we didn't, but also at the same time, that's what we're there for, is to make those recovery options. So, but yeah, the delayering process was nice and had to be methodical. It wasn't just taking and pulling things away. And at one point, I was telling you how big those debris piles were. We had 3 excavators working on one debris pile on a shore bank because of just how large and complex those debris piles were. Root balls is what you could call them.
Anything else you guys want to hit on real quick before we get to the HART operation? Then we'll come back to it. But like, highlights from the deployment as far as any of your operations or anything like that you want to hit on before we go to the HART stuff?
I truly think it was just a great team effort all the way around. Like you said, we're composed of a bunch of different disciplines within the team, and kind of the same thing with Maui. It's truly a team effort between the logistics guys, making sure we're going out in the morning, to coming back and making sure everything's taken care of, and then medical and hazmat, and even the doctors and safety officers. They all played a role, whether it was boots on the ground, whether it was being in a vehicle to canvass the area, from the TFLs, making sure that we had work set up for the next few days, and ensuring that we had work and ensuring that we were good to go and continue what we were doing. It was a true team effort, and that's what makes you the proudest when you're done, is that you had an impact on the locals, you had an impact on the event overall, and that you did it as a team, and walking away from there that you could truly hang your head high and say that this was great to be a part of.
Yeah. I mean, just hearing about that, I think it's definitely I don't think anybody can truly appreciate how much time, effort, and work was done by that group, and not just this deployment, right? A bunch of your guys' deployments where you've done similar types of operations. So, Mike, you have anything else you want to hit on?
No, I was just going to add that, you talked earlier about the human element, and that's really, to add what Bradley said, that's one of the big take-homes for us, is that those people you do interact with. If we didn't rescue them from a collapsed house or find their loved one, but nonetheless, sometimes just someone to talk to, I think the people appreciated that the most. In a lot of circumstances, we were the first people they had contact with, in a couple of days, just because of where they lived or how remote they were. So just to see a face that was checking up on them, that meant the world to them. And that, like I said, it helps us feel better. It feels like we're at least accomplished something, and in some way providing some help to those local residents.
And I think what we do every day, that's the biggest thing, right, is the human element. Even though it's something that might seem inconsequential to you,
Right.
It might be the biggest thing in the world to the person that you're there for. So,
Yep.
really cool. All right, Tim, let's go to you. So let's talk a little bit about, we talked about what HART is. Just explain a little bit about your deployment as far as when you got deployed, how that kind of happened, and where you went, and then we'll get into your operations.
All right. I'm trying to think of the timeline here, but I know on Wednesday leading up to the event, I was in a rescue swimmer class with some HART members in Howard County, and we were kind of talking back and forth. We knew a storm was coming. John Zauer, he is also on FEMA, Howard County Special Operations Captain. He's a HART member, and he's basically has a lot to do with the EMAC stuff. He was monitoring the requests online and was basically telling us, hey, there's a good chance HART is going to go somewhere. He was pointing more towards like Tennessee. I guess that was just looking at radar and stuff like that. And then Thursday, I believe that was a B shift. I ended up going to work. Mike Stream is our manager for Montgomery County, and he's basically like, you know, get your bags packed, have them. We don't know what's going to happen, but if that request comes in, you know, you need to be ready to go. I'm like, okay, you guys know how that is, right? Hurry up and wait. So I've got all my stuff packed, go through the whole shift. I get home and you know, we got our eyes to the you know, to the weather and, you know, all the news stations and stuff. We see what's happening down there, and I guess you guys were already deployed. And I'm just chomping at the bit, you know, because it's like you said, it's one of those things like you don't wish that on anybody, but the amount of training.
But if it does happen, you want to be there.
Yeah, like the amount of training that we put in, it's like I wish I could use my skills to help people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm chomping at the bit. I'm getting really excited. And that morning, I guess when I got off shift, I guess that was that Friday? I guess that was Friday morning. Mike said, you know, there's a good chance you're going to go. Just have your stuff ready. And I said, I do. I'm ready. You know, just tell me when to leave for the airfield. And finally, I got that call. I think it was going to be a 4 o'clock departure, 1600 out of Aberdeen, Edgewood. That's where we deploy from. So I got down there. I was excited. Of course, I wanted to get, you know, down there and have all my stuff ready. Got down there to the airfield, and of course we had crappy weather that had moved up into our area, and we were socked in with fog. They made the pilots, you know, determined, hey, it's not going to be safe to fly, because we were hoping to get down there, you know, Friday and be able to go to work. He was like, yeah, we're just not going to be able to do it. So, you know, we pack our stuff back up, put it in our car, and go home. And they told us, you know, 0600 Saturday morning, be ready to go. So, of course, get home, you know, could barely sleep, but at least, you know, I had an extra day with the family, extra night, you know, and just got to prep everything again, because I was on USAR back when I was at 29 years ago, never went anywhere. I see these guys go out the door all the time, and it's like they're doing it. You know, they're using their skills. It's exciting. They're gone for long periods of time. So I've never really been on that deployment, and the deployments before that Hart had weren't quite as long. And then I think Mike Stream had the longest one. I think he was 14 days. I could be wrong. But it gave me some more time to kind of prep the family, because this is big on our families.
Absolutely,
you know, they're at home. We've got kids and stuff like that, and we're missing out on this. You know, all the other chores kind of fell on my wife. But everybody kind of, the team steps up and kind of takes up the slack. So I prepared them a little bit more, and then got to the airfield Saturday morning. 0600, we had our briefing. Hey, we're going. So got the helicopter loaded up, which was pretty crazy.
So what do you guys fly? I guess they're showing that picture right now. Just
that's
explain, like, what you fly.
Yeah, that's our UH-60. It's a Black Hawk. We fly with 2 pilots up front.
And they're Army National Guard pilots?
Yes, Army National Guard. 2 pilots up front. We had 2 crew chiefs, and then we had 3 rescue technicians. Chris Thompson there on the left, Mike Ski. He's got a really long last name, so we call him Ski. Ski is a lieutenant in Baltimore County, and then myself. And then we brought down a couple extra pilots, because we had a 47 that flew down, or I think I said that earlier. They flew down earlier and just kind of staged. So we were flying down with extra pilots so that they could kind of rotate people.
Because for people who don't understand, that's like a Chinook, right? The dual rotor,
Yes.
huge cargo helicopter, basically just with some extra support kind of people and materials.
Yep. So the pilots are kind of limited on how many hours they can fly. So we had to make sure that we could rotate crews and stuff like that. So we ended up taking off, I believe it was around 8 o'clock. And it's about a 3-hour flight. The good thing is that we had a Robbie tank, so we didn't have to stop to refuel. A Robbie tank is basically an extra internal fuel tank that sits behind where the seats would be in the back of the aircraft. It added weight, but it allowed us to stay in the air a lot longer, and we didn't have to stop for fuel, which was great. So we got down there about 11 o'clock, got down to Salisbury, North Carolina. That was going to be our hub. It's a Black Hawk airfield, which is good. So if we had any issues with the aircraft, we could swap out parts. They had the mechanics there. They had all the parts ready. It would be a quick switchover versus, trying to get something from another airfield. So we flew into the airfield. There was hardly anybody there. North Carolina was hit hard. Salisbury, North Carolina is about a 2.5, 3 hour drive from Western North Carolina. It's about a 45-minute to an hour flight into the mountains. So when we were flying in there, we're looking at it like, this isn't bad. There's no trees down. There was a little bit of flooding in the reservoirs and stuff. Mm-hmm. But we're like, what are we here for?
Right. Yeah.
But the guys, there were some North Carolina HART guys that were there. They have a team as well. I think they can get 6 helicopters in the air. Oh. Most of them are from Charlotte Fire Department. We were kind of talking to a couple of those guys that were just waiting for an aircraft to become available. And we're like, hey, how bad is it? And they're like, it's bad. And I'm like, are we going to get work? Are we going to go? He's like, you're going to get a lot of work. So Chris and I, let's tighten it up a little bit. We spent time getting comms together because comms is a big thing. We're in a totally different state.
And do you guys operate like by yourself? Like once you get deployed, is you generally like single helicopter by yourself with just you guys kind of?
So when we are leaving the airfield, it's just us. If we send out if the EMAC request comes out and we can send 2 helicopters, great. I mean, we were ready with 2 helicopters, but they just wanted the 47 and they wanted us. So we were by ourselves. We were the only ones, the 47's doing their thing, dropping off supplies. We were the search and rescue helicopter. And we just didn't know what to expect. We're seeing stuff come back on social media and the news, like all this flooding. We didn't know if it was still going to be flooded. That's coming into Lake Lord right there. But we didn't know, what we were going to encounter heading out there. So, we brought all our water rescue gear. We had our fins and stuff like that. We're ready to pick people out of cars, whatever. We ended up getting our first mission around, I think it was 2:30 on Saturday. So we, they basically had a quick briefing with the pilots and said, get ready, get spun up.
And how many of you guys are in the aircraft when you go out on a mission like that?
Like I said, we had the two pilots, 2 crew chiefs, 3 techs in the back. So
that was kind of surprising to me. Just I'm used to like seeing the Eagle with 2 people on it, or the Trooper with 4 people, right? So having that many people in a helicopter,
I'll tell you what,
the thing's bigger than I imagined.
So it's great because with that incident, the amount of air traffic, and I'll talk about that maybe a little later, but the amount of air traffic with the military and you had your private aircraft all over the place, and these guys could probably tell you, like, the private aircraft that showed up for this storm and delivered supplies was phenomenal. Like, people just donated their time, their money, their aircraft to drop off supplies up into the mountains, and it was everywhere. So having 2 pilots, 2 crew chiefs, and us, all those extra eyes to kind of look around. It amazes me that something serious didn't happen because there was just so much air traffic. But having all of those eyes looking out and looking for people too, right? We would be flying from one mission to another and see somebody waving us down. I'm looking out the left side, and oh, hey, there's somebody waving us down, and turn around. So just having the extra eyes, the extra hands for managing people coming up on the hoist, it's crazy. Like, when we got into the mountains Saturday, we went right to work. Like, their dispatch.
So did you go there with a specific, like, hey, this person right here needs help? Is it that kind of thing, or is, hey, you just need to go to this area and look for? So
it was weird, and some people out there might have heard, like, a lot of the information was coming from social media like Facebook, because communications was knocked out. There was nothing until people started getting like Starlinks and stuff like that. But they couldn't make a phone call, but maybe they could get a message out on Facebook like, hey, I haven't heard from my grandmother since, before the storm. And we would fly out to an address, and we would do they were dropping us up into the mountains, Chris and I, and we're knocking on doors, which was kind of sketchy.
So they basically just lower you guys down from, from the helicopter?
Yeah. I mean, we couldn't land.
Yeah.
There were a couple spots that you might see where we landed where we could in riverbeds, people's backyards. So, we want to make sure we have a nice LZ here for the helicopters that we work with in Montgomery County there. It's just like that picture. That was a sloped area, and these pilots were just amazing dropping that helicopter in there. But it was what we had to do. But otherwise, you're up in the mountains. There's nowhere to land. So, yeah, they would lower Chris and I down. That picture right there, that was our first hoist, and we ended up hoisting, I believe it was like 8 or 9 people, a bunch of animals.
And that's just on one mission.
Yeah.
You hoisted that many times.
Yeah, we got a call that there was a community that was cut off. We saw the vehicles coming down the road, and we could see that the whole road below them was washed out. So they had no way to get off the mountain. So we're seeing them. They pull into this one yard, and they all get out. Chris goes down, and we would alternate between Chris and I on the hoist. They said, we've got a lot of people that send 2. And that became a common practice for us in the fact that we needed
So somebody can stay with the people that were down
there.
there.
Yeah, you need to triage.
Right. Yeah.
Because there were so many people that needed help. We would get a call like, hey, I think we've got 2 people that need help. You get down there. Hey, there's 2 more people coming off. And there's a family of 4 over here. And it was like, holy cow. Oh. So you had that other person triaging and figuring out who we're going to take. And then the other guy is putting them in the basket and sending them up. And then our Ski was the manager. He's up there putting people in seatbelts with the crew chiefs and just kind of managing the cabin, which is huge with an aircraft like that. You want everybody to be safe. So, but it was.
And where would you take the people? Like once you hoisted, did you go all the way back to your base, or would you just go?
So it was kind of cool. The local fire departments and FEMA teams and stuff like that would set up LZs in towns.
Okay.
So we had like certain LZs that we could drop these people off to. Sometimes when we got there, there'd be hardly anybody because it was so remote, but at least they had, some supplies. Other places, like we would go to this one ball field at a high school. They had EMS there. They had the fire department. They had some food, water. Later on, they ended up having some nonprofits show up and were offering, all kinds of supplies and housing and stuff like that to people. So, yeah, we would just, wherever we could find an LZ, we'd drop them off,
Like how many times would you say that you guys hoisted, whether it was people or you guys going up and down or rescues? I mean, during this whole, just to kind of put it in perspective for people, I mean, you think in Montgomery County, right? I mean, maybe you hoist somebody off the Billy Goat Trail with one of those helicopters, a couple times a year, maybe at the most, right? How many times do you guys say you hoisted just on these missions in this specific event?
So the total number of hoists we had, I believe, is 59. Wow. I believe
over a couple day span.
Yeah.
Wow.
The first 3 days were just crazy. I think there's a stat sheet that they could put up, but
you
the first couple.
Get that hoist of metal. Working overtime.
I mean, it was the deployment of a lifetime. You tell people how many hoists you did, and everything just went so smooth. This is everything we trained for. But yeah, 59 hoists. I think we had 80 people rescued. We had 20 dogs and cats, and then we also delivered food and water, MREs, stuff like that. So, yeah, it was that cable was working. Everything went really well. We would, in the morning, we would go out. We would fly till about 8 o'clock. And we would have stops too. A lot of times we would stage at little airports and stuff up in the mountains. There was a place called Foothills Airport, and that became our our substation.
Yeah.
It was kind of cool. Like they had the guy. It was run by a family. He'd have food for us, so we'd have a late lunch there, grab some food, and then we'd go out on other missions. Probably fly till 8 o'clock at night, and then by then it's kind of getting dark, and then we would fly back to Salisbury.
Wow. Did you guys have any interaction? Like, did you have any interaction with our FEMA team at all? Like while you were there, or
We flew
by
over.
happenstance?
I was gonna say there were some pictures up earlier of a town we operated in for several days. That
Swannanoa?
Yes.
Yeah. So, like I said, Zauer and Jeff, right, are on the team, and I believe they were on the ground. So they were texting
that's
Chris.
Swannanoa
Chris
there.
is from Howard County. He was texting them. I believe I was texting you for
Yeah.
a little bit, right?
Yeah, the town that they have up now actually is Swannanoa, where we were working for 4 or 5 days right there.
Yeah,
It's-
and that
it's a little
town
bit
is, I
east
mean,
of
that is
Nashville.
right on the river.
Yeah.
there.
Yes.
I mean,
And what
And
you
I-
see there, Matt, is sorry, Bradley.
Yeah.
I mean, the river there is for the most part what it should be, what it
Yeah.
normally looks like, but to both far edges, the left and right of the screen and beyond,
so you see all the
is where the
mud
flood
and
level
debris
and the
and
mud.
stuff all-
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
There
That's
was a
wild.
picture we were talking about. It was almost like an eighth, maybe even a quarter of a mile that was pushed. Mud was just all the way up into parking lots.
Yeah, I mean,
up
you can
to
tell
the
where
roof
the
line
water
of-
had been flowing just based
Yeah.
on the mud and debris and everything.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we were on the same storm. We were on the same event. Different experiences. We covered a lot of ground, and half the time I had no idea where we were. You know, you're flying from one town to another. These guys are, you know, they're at their camp or whatever you want to call it, and then they're going out kind of this area. We covered just a wide area up in the mountains, and the human factor, like you guys were talking about, everyone was appreciative. Like not one person was negative. I mean, they lost everything. They were cut off, and you get down there and you're getting hugs.
They're offering you bottles of water.
Yeah, I had that too.
crazy,
It was amazing. Like the people out there, very resilient. You were talking about the guy that repaired the road so that you guys could get up there. Within a couple days, we're flying around. We're seeing convoys of bobcats and excavators and all this stuff. Like these people are going to work. You know,
we were encountering civilians all the time. They were coming from eastern North Carolina with, you know, like you said, just a low boy and a skid steer in the back, asking where they can go to work. We're like,
yeah.
pick a neighborhood, you know, and they were definitely coming out of the woodwork to help their neighbors.
We flew into Asheville one night. We were done our missions. We had to fly into Asheville to get fuel so we could fly home or back to Salisbury. And there were all these gooseneck trailers jacked up 4x4s, and I'm like, and they're waiting at the gate. I'm like, oh, what's happening here? They were waiting for, they were flying in generators on these, you know, these aircraft, these private aircraft. You know, people would donate stuff, and they would fly it into Asheville, and then these guys would pick it up and drive it up into the mountains. The whole community was just like banded together. So
Yeah,
it's pretty wild.
I mean, just hearing stories like that, it's obviously one thing to be there. Even just hearing the stories, that's cool. It kind of gives you some hope and humanity and people helping people kind of thing.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
described it as, you know, you have the Cajun Navy, and then we saw a different side of the Cajun Navy with private helicopters coming in. It was almost, it's almost like we call it a mini war zone. The helicopters were flying so low. There was no minimal ceiling limit. They were just coming right over top and landing and dropping things and going. So
Yeah, I had a video. I guess we were flying over Chimney Rock, and we were unable to get in and land in some places that needed it. And these little Robinson helicopters were dropping in, you know, landing on bridges. And there's actually a video. I think it's a Bell, but they were landed on a bridge with you know, they would just mark H or whatever or an X, and that's where these helicopters were landing. And we just couldn't get in there, and they were essential to getting the supplies, and they were dropping off the Starlinks and stuff like that so people could start communicating. So it was pretty wild.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're about out of time, believe it or not, already for the hour. But yeah, I think, you know, just hearing the story is awesome, and getting the stories out to, you know, because people might hear them in passing, working with you guys or whatever. But getting it out to everybody to have everybody be able to truly appreciate, I think, the opportunities that are given to us, right, because we work here and because of the training that we get, and you get that opportunity to go out and help these people in the most serious times of need. these major events and having the impact you guys had. I mean, it not only do you guys get to do that, but then the training and experiences that you've gotten now, going to places like this and doing these things, you've been able to bring back here and do the training with the the rest of the water team, the in-county people, and hey, you have that vast amount of hoist experience that you got in those couple days now that you can bring back and translate to here, directly benefiting the residents and visitors of Montgomery County too, when you respond here. So that's awesome. Do you guys have anything else, like last things you want to touch on about the deployment, or about your teams or anything like that?
I mean, I'd just like to say it was an honor to be able to represent Montgomery County. I mean, it's like you said, what an experience, and to be able to take this back to our department, it's huge.
And it makes me proud just working here, knowing that people like you guys are out there representing us on the department level and county level and the state level even, and all these places, and doing these great things. So that's awesome. Well, so thank you guys again for your time and joining us. I'm sorry it took so long to get you guys here to tell these stories, but I think it's very valuable, and it's great for people to hear from you guys. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Just to wrap up, guys, again, thank you for joining us. A really good boss talk. We do have a couple more episodes coming up here. For May, we already have 2 scheduled. So on May 12th, we'll have another boss talk. We'll hear from a couple of our newer officers about operations on unfortunately what turned out to be a fatal house fire a month or so ago. And then we also have a special from the command post coming up May 22nd. We'll be bringing in some of the command officers from the District of Columbia Fire Department to speak on the operations in the plane crash in the Potomac. So that should be very enlightening as well. So again, thank you everybody for joining us, and have a good rest of your day.